it's just wave after wave of people cheering and celebrating. It's a pretty jubilant crowd. Initially, when the first wave came through, you heard someone yell, "We got 'em," and then they shouted over the loudspeaker, "God bless America," a chant that was taken up by a few people here. It's just in the last 10 or 15 minutes of people just cheering. And, I've been listening to your conversation a little bit about how America has changed since 9/11 and how this will put that into perspective as well. And there are so many people here right now who have been just really scared all day long. It's a very tight-knit community. As I said earlier on the air, they've been emailing each other constantly on Facebook, hugging each other in the crowds, kind of trying to stay in touch and find out what's going on. And when they heard actually on our air that this had come to an end, just cheers went up immediately, and a sense of relief washed over this entire crowd.
We have heard, Kevin, that the suspect, that Jahar Tsarnaev, is being taken to Mount Auburn Hospital. Have you actually seen him being led into a car? Do you know if he's actually still at the scene?
Can you hear me, Sasha?
I can.
We saw an ambulance come out heading towards Watertown Square, and then we saw an ambulance kind of go back up Mount Auburn, which would have been towards Mount Auburn Hospital. So at that point, everyone cheered, assuming that the suspect was in that ambulance. And at that point, we saw lots of law enforcement officials shaking hands and patting each other in the back as well.
And at this point, do you know if there's a search continuing to go on of the garage in that house? Is there still work being done there?
I'm not at that location right now, so I can't tell you what's happening there. I'm just sort of in this crush of people right now as the law enforcement officials just continue to, drive out, walk by us. Anytime someone comes by, it was a pretty poignant moment a moment ago when the MBTA police came out. There was a small contingent of them. Of course, we know that one of the officers who was injured was from the MBTA Transit Police, and they got an extra loud cheer of applause when they walked by.
Right. This is 33-year-old Richard H. Donahue, Jr., the transit police officer who underwent surgery today at Mount Auburn Hospital, the same hospital where Jahar Tsarnaev is now being taken. We know that Richard Donahue is in a stable condition, but also still considered in critical condition. And Kevin, as we hear, this is a not just a brief celebratory moment. This is a great deal of joy, it sounds like, on the streets out there.
Absolutely. Obviously this has been a very serious situation, but I think people are just reacting to, what everybody was hoping for, that this situation would come to an end, and come to an end, as Bruce was saying earlier, without anyone else dying.
Kevin, why louder cheers? Are people cheering as police cars go by? Are they cheering the officers?
They're cheering the officers. There's a Watertown police officer car going by, the Watertown Fire Department. People are cheering for their hometown right now. We also see
Kevin, it's Anthony. So you're down at Mount Auburn Street and Franklin. I'm looking at pictures on the TV of people lining the street all the way up to Mount Auburn Street and Arlington Street. So, I mean, this is a long procession, a long celebratory procession, if is what I'm seeing.
Absolutely. I'm actually on the other end from there, but we have, it's almost like how people would line a parade route at this point, with people just cheering as the cars go by, moment after moment. I thought it was going to sort of die down for a few minutes. I hear people, making plans to go to local bars now and continue the celebration.
I also want to mention that we are seeing that there may be a 9:30 p.m. press conference that investigators will be holding on the capture of the suspect. That's 15 minutes from now. Of course, we will cover that live. Again, we want to remind you that many of the press conferences today were significantly delayed, one of them by 2 hours. But we're being told right now that in 15 minutes there will be a statement. Kevin, thanks very much. We'll definitely be back to talk with you later. I want to see if we still have Bruce Rydell on the line, who we've been talking to. Bruce again spent 30 years as an officer at the CIA dealing with terrorism issues. And Bruce, I'm almost reluctant to ask you this question, but because we're in such a period of celebration right now, we've clearly seen what a massive coordinated law enforcement effort can accomplish. But have we learned anything this week about how we cannot let a tragedy like this happen again?
Oh, I think there's many, many lessons to be learned from this week. There's lessons about the necessity of resilience in the face of terrorism. There's lessons about how you bring in the community, how you make the people of Boston and surrounding suburbs part of the solution. I think there's a lot of positive lessons that come out of this, that if you bring the community in, if you invite people to help, it will really make a difference. But the biggest lesson is that we're going to have to expect that terrorism is a problem for the foreseeable future in the United States. We can't let it cripple us. We have to respond to it with common sense and good judgment. That means sometimes we're going to close down a city for a little while. It's going to suffer an economic loss. But we're going to be able to bounce back, and what we're seeing tonight in Boston is a bounce back.
Have we learned how you can prevent bombings like this from happening or make it more likely that they won't happen? Anything learned there?
You know, it's extremely difficult to do. I suspect that what we're going to find out when this is all over is that the distance between when these two individuals decided that they were going to carry out an act of terror to when they actually carried it out was very, very short, and that the number of people who were involved in the plot were probably just the two of them. It's very, very difficult to try to prevent a plot which has a very brief gestation period and has only a few people involved in it. That's a counterterrorism nightmare.
Bruce, what makes you think that? What makes you think?
With a few of those things like that.
And what makes you think that might be the case? A brief gestation period, just two people. What signals you that that could be what we're dealing with?
What we're looking at here is two individuals who are involved. We'll learn a lot more if the younger brother survives and if he's able to be debriefed and interrogated successfully. But from looking at it and from seeing a lot of other terrorist incidents, these kind of small-scale operations where there's one or two people involved, they have only a relatively unsophisticated bomb. I don't want to say it's not, it's obviously a deadly bomb, but it's not the most sophisticated bomb. There aren't a lot of other people involved. It's very hard to penetrate a plot which only occurs over a matter of a month or two. Let me contrast it. The 9/11 plot gestated for 2 years. At the end of it, it involved 19 terrorists and dozens of other people in Europe, Africa, and Asia, all of whom knows something about what's going on. From the intelligence standpoint, you can penetrate that. You can find a hole somewhere. If it's two guys who come up with a plot and decide they're going to bomb the Boston Marathon, and 3 days later they go about and do it, that's a really, really hard plot to penetrate.
Bruce, if you can continue to stay with us, please do. But we want to go to another WBUR reporter who is at Mount Auburn Hospital, where Johar Tsarnaev is being taken. This is Steve Brown. Steve, you're at the hospital. Do you know if he's actually arrived there yet?
Oh, we do not know that. I can't confirm that for sure. We heard when we were, I was in Watertown just a little while ago, at sort of the Watertown Mall, which was where they had all the media penned up for overnight. And the word was that they were bringing him here. Now, once I got here, I did hear from another reporter that maybe they were bringing him somewhere else. But again, that was just from a reporter that I know here that just kind of raised that as a specter. There are a lot of crowds here. People, it's probably 300 to 400 people out on the sidewalks here. A lot of residents from the Cambridge area, all here just waiting to see all the activity. A lot of police here, but mostly all Cambridge police. I don't see any state police here, and that makes me think that there might be something to the fact that maybe they were bringing him someplace else. Again, nobody here to confirm anything, but I'm not seeing the heavy state police presence that I had seen over in Watertown. I would figure that I would see that here, but so far it's just the Cambridge police just trying to keep the crowds under control.
All right, Steve, if you see anything, let us know right away if you would. And to recap where we are, the 19-year-old suspect in the Boston Marathon bombings, Johar Tsarnaev, has been taken into custody. He has been captured alive. He was in a boat in a backyard of a home in East Watertown on Franklin Street. He had been on the run for roughly 18 hours since the early hours of this morning, all day long. A massive manhunt happened today throughout the Watertown area, a massive lockdown of all of Boston and the surrounding suburbs, including Brookline, Newton, Cambridge, Somerville voluntarily. That, in the end, despite that shelter order that was in place throughout the day being lifted briefly this afternoon, that ultimately there has a suspect that's been yielded. That is 19-year-old Johar Tsarnaev, believed to be the younger brother of the pair of brothers who are responsible for Monday's Boston Marathon bombing. We are being told that at 9:30 there will be a news conference that investigators will hold to update us on what we've been hearing so much about in the past 2 hours. We will cover that live. We're being told 9:30. Many of these have been delayed today, but we will be going live to it when it happens. Again, we have heard early reports that the suspect, Johar Tsarnaev, is being taken to Mount Auburn Hospital in Cambridge. Our reporter Steve Brown, who is at Mount Auburn Hospital, says he's now hearing it could be a different hospital, but we are waiting to hear if he does indeed arrive. So we will be going live to that press conference when it happens, as we've also been hearing from our reporters in the field in Watertown, an enormous celebratory gathering right there as we hear the joy of the people on the streets who are celebrating. I want to go back to one of our reporters in the field, and this is Bruce Gellerman, who is in Watertown. No, I'm sorry. We are going to go back to the field briefly. We are going to go back to Bruce Rydell, who's the longtime CIA officer. He had spent 30 years with the CIA dealing with terrorism issues. Bruce is now a senior fellow at the Brookings Institution's Intelligence Project. And Bruce, we've been talking about the significance of how quickly this turned around and your sense of whether we've learned anything this week that can prevent this kind of thing from happening again. What do you think what have we learned from this week that law enforcement then sits down together and tries to decide, what do we need to know now? What do we need to do differently? What have we learned?
Well, I think the biggest lesson is how to involve a community in a positive way in order to get the best possible outcome. The authorities, the police and law authorities in Massachusetts and Boston reached out to the community. They asked them for their pictures. They asked them for their information. We got the testimony of the young individual who lost both his legs, who provided very, very important information about the people that he'd seen at the spot. All of that is a very important lesson in how to use a community, a city, to actually assist the police and the intelligence community in bringing the perpetrators to justice, finding out who they are, and then ultimately bringing them in. One other thing I'd like to say, we're fortunate that the FBI has among the best interrogators in the world, and if this young captured perpetrator is now able to survive, the FBI will be able to get an awful lot of information out of them. They know how to interrogate someone, and they know how to get information out of somebody. That's one of the FBI's strong suits.
I also want to mention we've been following the Boston Police Department's Twitter account. 16 minutes ago, the Boston Police sent out this tweet, which I think is particularly poignant and important for us to stop and remember. The tweet says, "In our time of rejoicing, let us not forget the families of Martin Richard, Lingzi Liu, Crystal Campbell, and Officer Sean Collier." Martin Richard was the 8-year-old boy from Dorchester who was killed that day. Lingzi Liu, the Chinese grad student at BU. Crystal Campbell, the young woman, 28, 29 years old from the Medford or Arlington area. And Officer Sean Collier. He was the MIT campus police officer who was killed in this. So there is joy, but there's also been incredible tragedy and death this week.
Yeah, Sasha, speaking of tweets from the Boston Police Department, there's one that I found particularly poignant as well. It says, Mayor Menino, : now this is quoting what Mayor Menino said yesterday, "I've never loved this city and its people more than I do today. Nothing can defeat the heart of this city. Nothing," which are words spoken by Mayor Menino yesterday.
Particularly significant since Mayor Menino is now in his final final term as by choice as mayor of Boston.
But just to make a note here, Yohar Sanayev is still a suspect in these bombings as well. He's now in police custody, but officially he still is a suspect. And as Bruce Rydell and David Boyer have been telling us, we're now at the beginning of the next phase of this investigation, which is the legal phase and the phase of trying to actually find out what happened. But until we get much further down the road in terms of the next steps regarding jurisprudence, Yohar Sanayev, while he is in custody with the Boston police, he is a suspect in these bombings as well.
And importantly, he is also an American citizen. He's been an American citizen for the last year or so, as I understand.
And in the country for at least a decade.
That's right. Some decisions are going to have to be made as to how he is prosecuted. Were the state to do this, I could imagine him being charged with 173 or more counts of assault and battery with attempt to murder. This is going to go federal because the terrorist charges are federal, and it almost surely will go to federal.
And Bruce Rydell, I want to say thank you very much for spending so much time on the line with us. Again, Bruce has had for 30 years been an officer at the CIA dealing with terrorism issues, has given us some very interesting and important insights into what's been going on. Bruce, thank you for being with us tonight.
Thank you for inviting me.
And I want to go